And I was at the head of a virus lab where we were doing research with virology, and wondered what on earth was wrong with me. The internet was just coming into being, and using a combination of information that I had plus the internet, figured out that what I probably had was PPS. So yes, I'm sure that that's what I had, and I started on the downhill slope that most everybody's familiar with, where fatigue and muscle weakness, new muscle weakness, then increased fatigue, increased muscle weakness. I started tripping, falling. I wound up having to lie on the floor to take a nap in the middle of the day in order to function. It was a standard story. And it got continuously worse, slowly over a period of years, so that I went from an AFO to a KAFO because I couldn't stand for any length of time. I went from using a cane to having a scooter for long distances, and it looked like life was going to be pretty grim, and I was pretty annoyed with the situation. So I decided to research it. So I did. I dug into what was known at the time about PPS. Now, by now we're talking, the year must have been about 2000, thereabouts. And I did a lot of research along with Eddie Bolenbach, and in fact we even did a survey, and we got a lot of useful information from this, and discovered basically that underlying PPS, as well as underlying all chronic disease, is inflammation. Usually subacute, but it doesn't have to be. It can be. It's a case of chronic inflammation. So I took the knowledge that I had, and I used anti-inflammatory techniques, tricks, but not overt medication other than aspirin. And over a period of 3 years, and it was 3 rigorous years where I really stuck to a regimen that I had developed to combat inflammation, I started to see improvements. And so now it's, what, 2008? I no longer wear the AFO. I still do get fatigued. I still do have some muscle weakness. I've learned how to cope. I do use pacing. But I'm also a lot better than I was. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So what did I do? What areas of stress did I work at to reduce inflammation, which in turn enabled me to have a better quality of life? Well, I'd like to be able to tell you that there was one at a time, because as a scientist one should only work on one variable at a time.
That's not life.
Unfortunately, I tend to go for the full bag right away, and so I can't actually pinpoint one, but I can tell you what I did. I decided, you know, if you're a scientist, you pick one thing. Let's say you decide to raise your glutathione levels, for instance. So glutathione is an amino acid that is vital for the proper function of your immune system. And as we age, we produce less glutathione and also absorb less from our diet. So the immune system is working at less than optimal. Now, the immune system has two functions, by the way. It both turns on and turns itself off. So when you say the proper functioning of the immune system, it means that the immune system retains the ability to reduce its activity as well as to increase inflammation. It can and must, and in fact it must reduce inflammation at the same time. Okay, so let's say that I decided a proper scientist would only supplement themselves with more glutathione for a period of, an arbitrary period. Let's say they might say 3 months, because that would be a fairly decent interval to see if there's any body response.
What is that?
What is glutathione?
And where do you get it?
Oh, well, it's an amino acid, and it comes from undenatured whey protein. That's the best source. I mean, there are other sources, but undenatured whey protein is a source of, readily absorbable source of glutathione. It's in meat, and it's in milk, and it's in other things too. But as I say, as we get older, our intestines don't absorb as much as they did. So this also helps to explain why PPS tends to strike later on in age, because the body is, well, aging, but things are not as optimal as they were when we were younger. So, okay, so back to whey protein. So I should have done that, but of course I couldn't do that, because I knew that that was one thing that work. But there are many other things that would be useful too. Not the least of which, in fact, the most important of which is the amount of visceral fat that a person carries, the amount of fat that you carry around your organs. So it meant that I needed to reduce fat. And the best way to do that, of course, was to look into the various ways of not just diets, but changing how you eat, which brought me to the glycemic index, which is another whole story. And then, at the same time as that, and tied in with that, is insulin resistance. So this is all of this is now combined in one package, and that's what makes it really hard to tease things apart. The whey protein is kind of by itself. You can say, okay, that's a specific thing. It doesn't really impinge much upon fat or the activities of fat. But all the rest of the things, reducing weight, the glycemic index, insulin resistance, those are all very closely entwined. So I attacked that. And then perhaps the most important one, and the one that is in some ways the easiest to do and in other ways the most difficult to do, is to attack your stress levels. And the best way to attack stress level is any one of the types of meditation that are available. So yoga is a very good form because it combines both meditation and physical exercise. If you get the right kind of yoga, there's many kinds of yoga. Just straight out meditation, where you just sit quietly and try to empty your mind of all thoughts, that works beautifully. Guided meditations are probably the easiest things to use for people, and there's tons of tapes and CDs and people out there who are only too happy to lead you in a guided meditation where you walk down a lovely path and you sit among whatever, by the ocean or among roses or whatever turns you on. And those are great. They're really good. In fact, I would recommend starting with them rather than just sitting there staring at a candle flame trying to empty your mind. That doesn't work too well at first. But meditation is the single most important step in lowering inflammation. And it's also the most difficult to do, just because nobody has time. Or you put it off, and it's so easy to say, well, what's it doing? I'm just sitting there. But there's lots and lots of studies to show that it is the most effective way to reduce the immune system overaction or overreaction. It reduces the stress hormone levels immediately, and far better, actually, than drugs. And drugs all have side effects.